and welcome to the Ruth MacFit podcast. I'm very, very happy to be here with you today. Now, I had a week off putting out an episode of the podcast, and actually I wasn't even going to record an episode today, but it was exactly choosing not to record the podcast that inspired me to do this episode. Because today I want to talk to you about that feeling when your brain is just stuck in go. You know, when there's so much to do, so many tabs open in your head that the only thing you feel you can do is keep pushing, keep saying, I'll just get this done. And then I'm going to do this. And then I'm going to do this. And this was me earlier in the week. I did something that I don't normally do. And that is I'd worked all weekend. Now, normally I am quite good at protecting my downtime so that I feel like I go into the new week with a kind of a reset, recovered. But I've been building the new website for the No Crap Cake method, and I was working with my web developer. It was all really exciting and fun, and my brain has been buzzing with so many ideas, but also along with that, some little problems that were arising as well. And before I knew it, I was just sneaking back into my office, sitting at my PC, and I actually joked with my husband that the automations that I was trying to create and sync that weren't working, it was a bit like drugs. Like each time I was like, this time is the last time. I won't need to do it again. It's going to work. I'll just give it one more go. And then by Sunday evening, I could feel that kind of buzzing, that bubbling in my head. I was thinking about all the things that I still had left to do for the website. And I hadn't even considered the fact that it was actually the next weekend that we were going away. And even though I'm going to be working a bit while I'm away, there's still lots that needs to happen before I go. Not only building the website, but also making sure that I've packed, that I've got content sorted, that my boys are sorted, that there's life admin things to do as well. And it all started just whirling around in my head. It was like a washing machine on a fast spin cycle, you know, just whir. And on Monday morning, I woke up and I was already in that state where, you know, when you open your eyes and it feels like your brain just presses go, that the high pressure track is just on. And it was saying, you haven't done this yet. Don't forget to do that. You're running out of time for this. And you always do that on that day. And my instinct, if I'm completely honest, and this is something I thought I didn't do anymore, was just to crack on. I was going to make a cuppa, go and sit at my computer and just power on through. Because if in doubt, do more, right? But I also had my sister-in-laws staying, and my sister-in-law was sitting at the table on Monday morning, and she said, before we leave, why don't we just get everything out your head? We'll do it together. And my immediate thought was, I don't have time for this. I'm just going to go into my office and I'll do that in a moment. I just need to get started. But thankfully, she was quite insistent. So we just stood there and we did a proper brain dump at the whiteboard in my kitchen. Everything that was floating around my head, she wrote up onto the whiteboard. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Things that I needed to do for work, client check-ins, website jobs, calls I needed to make, podcast, family stuff, all the little things that felt like they were like shouting at me. And once I looked at this long list, I thought, oh, okay, no wonder I've been feeling a bit like my brain is full. This is quite a lot, and I am only one person. And then my lovely sister-in-law asked me a very simple question. She was like, what of these things can wait until tomorrow? And that was actually a real turning point, because then I was able to look at that list and go, actually, those things don't have to be done today. And the podcast can wait. I can have a week off the podcast. I never do. I'm consistent with it. 1 week is fine. No one is waiting for those particular things, and the world wasn't going to end if I didn't do them immediately. So we moved them into the future job list, and then we looked at the list again and said, right, what's actually important today? And for me, that was things like client check-ins and the stuff that really impacts the running of the business day to day and the people I work with. So we circled those 3 most important jobs, and I made a little deal with myself. That's it. I'm not going to be touching anything else until those things are done. And I found myself tempted at points to sway into a different direction, but I didn't. And what happened next was actually quite interesting, because as soon as I simplified it down into those first tasks, I could feel myself relax and my shoulders drop and my brain felt clearer. Instead of trying to hold that huge list of things in my head, I just had 3. And then funnily enough, I actually got more done. I was focused. I wasn't flitting between jobs. And once I ticked off those 3, I had the energy and the headspace to do a bit more. And it didn't feel like it was coming from a place of panic, but from a place of like, I'm making progress. This feels great. I'm proud of what I'm doing. It was such a simple shift from going from like go, go, go mode to stopping and looking and choosing. And this is what I want to talk to you about in this episode, because I see this all the time, not only with my own life, but with members of the community, and especially women who are in their 40s and beyond, who are spinning a lot of plates. The temptation when we're overwhelmed and our brain is stuck in that go mode is to keep moving and to believe that more effort is going to equal more progress. But actually, so much of the research and so much of our lived experience tells us the opposite. Stopping even briefly can improve our focus, our decisions, our energy, and our consistency. So in other words, stopping isn't you failing. Stopping is often the thing that helps you move forward. You know, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Sometimes we need to slow down in order to speed up. So let's talk about what's actually going on when your brain feels like it's stuck in that super go mode. That feeling when that list in our head is endless and we're darting from one thing to another. And even when we sit down, you can't switch off because you're already thinking about the next job. What's happening here isn't just being busy. This is a bit of brain chemistry going on, mixed in with modern life, of course. When we keep pushing without stopping, without pausing, the part of our brain that helps us plan and make decisions, which is the prefrontal cortex, starts to get tired. And that's the bit that's responsible for our logical thinking, our focus, and our impulse control. And when it's overworked, it becomes like that phone that's been on too many apps for too long, and it slows down, it overheats, and then it eventually crashes. And scientists call this decision fatigue, which is something I've spoken about a fair bit in the past. It's every little choice that we're making, and that's draining our mental energy. This is things like, what should I wear? What should I have for breakfast? What am I going to have for dinner? Oh, should I reply to that message now or shall I do it later? Do the kids need me to do that thing, or what do I need to get ready for them? Each of these tiny choices are chipping away at our brain's capacity to think clearly and stay calm. And there's research showing that when decision fatigue sets in, we tend to do one of two things. We either procrastinate, avoiding the decision altogether, or we choose the easiest option, even if it's not the best one for us. And this is exactly what we see with health habits and fat loss too. You know, you've been in that go mode all day, making hundreds of little decisions, and by the evening, your brain says, you know what, I'm done. I am done. Let's just open the wine and order something easy. And this, again, it isn't willpower. So often women will say, I just lack willpower. No. This is just simply how your brain works. And then on top of that, when we don't take those regular breaks, our attention becomes fragmented. And psychologists call this attention residue. Every time we switch from one task to another, without closing that loop, a little bit of our attention stays stuck on the thing that we've just left. So even when you're trying to move on, part of your brain is still thinking about that last thing. That's why multitasking feels busy, but it's rarely productive. There's also the issue of stress hormones. When you're in that constant state of go, cortisol and adrenaline stay high, and a little burst of those hormones helps you focus. And a little burst of those hormones is great. It's going to help you focus. But when it stays elevated, you move from productive energy into that survival mode. And here our body doesn't know the difference between I've got this massive deadline and, oh shit, I'm being chased by a tiger. It just knows that you haven't stopped. And in that state, your brain isn't designed to be creative, calm, or reflective. It's designed to survive. That's why when you're tired or stressed, you forget things. You're more likely to snap, or you find it hard to concentrate. And even short breaks, as little as 5 to 10 minutes, can really reduce this fatigue and improve focus and help you make better decisions. It's like giving your brain a chance to breathe. But I know, as I said, because I've been there very recently, that when you're stuck in this loop, it can feel counterintuitive to stop. You tell yourself that you don't have time to rest, when in reality, you don't have time not to. Because without those pauses, your brain keeps operating on a half-charged battery. And this isn't just about work. It shows up everywhere in how we eat, how we move, how we talk to ourselves. I've seen so many women who have approached fat loss in the same way. Full speed ahead, get this shit done, strict plan, big expectations, and then they just crash, understandably. It's that same pattern. Their brain has just been stuck in go the whole time. But the good news is this can change, and it starts with something so incredibly simple or at least it sounds incredibly simple, and that is stopping. It's not quitting, it's not giving up, but deliberately pressing pause so that you can reset. So now let's look at what actually happens when we do stop, or even just pause. Earlier, I mentioned how the front part of your brain, that prefrontal cortex that's responsible for logical decision-making areas, gets overloaded when we're in constant go mode. When we pause, we give that part of the brain a breather. This is what scientists call moving from the task network, which helps us focus, into the default mode network, where creativity, reflection, and problem solving happen. Now, this always draws me back into a book that I read a while back called The Chimp Paradox. And in this book, they describe the main systems in our brain as the chimp, the human, and the computer. Now, the chimp is the emotional and impulsive part of our brain. It wants to get shit done now. The human is that rational part of our brain that helps us make those thoughtful decisions. And the computer runs on habits. It's all automatic. It's the behaviors we've been building up over time that we've practiced lots and lots of. And when life's busy, that chimp is taking charge. It's fueled by adrenaline and urgency. And the human, our logical part, gets drowned out because it's so tired from all of those decisions that it's been making, from being stuck in that constant state of alert and go. And then the computer steps in and it reaches for those old autopilots, the one that feels easiest, the patterns we've practiced most, that are most familiar, and feel safe even when they're not the ones that we want. And this is the moment that we'll often find ourselves saying, why did I do that? I do know better. It's that moment where you've promised yourself an early night, but those cat videos end up having you scrolling until midnight. Don't pretend you haven't. You tell yourself that you're just going to have one biscuit, but they just happen to be dark chocolate hobnobs, and then suddenly the whole packet's gone. Or perhaps you plan to train after work and you sit down just for a minute, but find yourself just catching up on traitors, and then you want to see who Joe Marler's scowling at, and before you know it, the opportunity to train has gone. These things are not lack of motivation or willpower. As I said, this is a sign that your chimp and the computer are running the show. The human's just too depleted to be stepping in at this point. And this is where the decision fatigue we were talking about earlier is going to link in. Because when you've made all those decisions throughout the day, your human brain simply runs out of fuel. But when we pause, you're not just resting, you're giving it a chance to come back online. That's a moment of awareness when you can think, hang on, I don't actually want to do this, instead of just reacting on autopilot. It enables you to make choices and not reactions. And I've noticed the same thing with my body, even recently. Once I slowed that brain down, I actually noticed a connection that I didn't notice when I was in go mode. My back has been flaring up, not like really badly, but enough to notice. And because I didn't feel like I was particularly stressed, I didn't make the link that it could be why. But actually, when I took that time to pause, I realized that it wasn't emotional stress. I had this mental load and the constant low level tension of juggling, planning, and never fully switching off. My body then was just simply showing the signs before my mind had had time to catch up. So one of my priorities this week has actually been to plan in some calm and creating some space where my mind and my muscles can actually decompress. Because I know from experience that when I do that, my back often feels better too. And the more that I work with women at this stage of life, the more I see this pattern, how closely our mind and our body are linked. So if your brain is racing and your muscles don't relax properly, our breathing stays shallow and recovery feels slower. And it's important to remember that the fix isn't more stretching, more supplements, or another thing to do. It's giving your nervous system a moment to reset. And remember that studies do show that even 5 or 10 minute breaks can reduce that fatigue, restore your focus, and then shift your body out of that stress response. And when that happens, everything just starts working better. Your focus, your choices, your digestion, your hormones, even your pain levels. So yes, sometimes the most productive thing you can do is pausing without trying to be productive. So how do we actually create that pause? Because knowing we need to slow down is one thing, right? But doing it when life feels relentless is quite another. And I would highly recommend that we make a pause something that's planned and deliberate, not something that only happens when we get to the point where we crash. So let's look at a few ways we can do this, from quick resets to those bigger weekly pauses. Obviously, I mentioned earlier that I'd had a brain dump and how good that felt for me. Because when we're feeling overwhelmed, our brain is trying to hold on to too much at once. So getting it onto a paper or a whiteboard, as I did, or a notes app, is going to instantly reduce that pressure. It tells your brain, you can stop spinning, I've got this captured. And once it's written down, you can then organize it. I love to use Trello, which I've spoken about before, which is basically my brain on a screen. And after that brain dump, I can then move the tasks into specific days of the week so I can see what's on for today, what I can do later, and what's on the 1-day list. And it means I don't need to hold it all in my head. I can just open Trello and know what's realistic for that day. And if I finish my priorities early, I can always pull something from another day. This structure normally, unless I let it slip as I did at the weekend, keeps me calm and stops everything feeling urgent at once. And this is our human brain stepping in to manage a chimp and taking back control. My husband described this once to me, and I do like the analogy. He described it as looking to a pond of swimming fish. And if you imagine each of those fish is one of your thoughts, and it's hard to focus on any of them when they're just swimming around. But when you were, or if you were, don't actually do this with fish, to take them out and lay them where they couldn't swim, you'd be able to focus on each one a lot more clearly. And I know it's not a particularly nice analogy because of the fact you're taking fish out of the water. I think it does help us see what's going on in our brain. And it's definitely a go-to for me normally, is to know that I need to get things out my head. But you do need to remind yourself of that. And sometimes it does take somebody else reminding you. But the second strategy I want to talk to you about is breathing. When our brain is racing, one of the fastest ways to get yourself back into balance is to breathe right down into our diaphragm, into our belly. Most of us breathe into our chest, especially when we're stressed, which keeps the body in that fight or flight mode. But when we breathe slowly down into our belly, you're sending a physical signal to yourself that says you're safe. And one of my favorites is actually the physiological sigh. It's a double inhale followed by a long, slow exhale. We'll look at it in more detail near the end of the podcast. But it's something that our body naturally does when it's releasing tension. And research shows it's one of the quickest ways to calm the nervous system. So when we cry, we naturally do this. That is the physiological sigh. You don't need to do it like that, though. The third thing that you can do when your mind is racing, but your body feels restless, is to do something different, but something that still feels gently productive. I find this so helpful. If I've been sitting at my desk for too long, I'll find things like folding the laundry or doing the washing up can actually help me feel calmer. In the evening, I've actually started knitting again. In fact, our evenings now often have my husband painting his Warhammer. I know, he is a grown up, but there we go. And I'll be knitting. And I find that keeping my hands busy really, really does calm my mind. And it stops me automatically reaching for those old autopilot behaviors, things like snacking or scrolling or checking my phone or my emails. And it helps me wind down before bed. You're still engaged, but your mind gets a break from that constant problem solving. Then number 4 is building some calm into a week, thinking of calm as that non-negotiable appointment with yourself. Perhaps that's journaling, just a couple of minutes in the evening, reading, baking, going for a walk. One of my favorites, going for a run without tracking. Now, this is something I really want to talk to you about in a bit more detail. Because like decision fatigue, I sometimes think that our brain can get full of all the data that we're provided about ourselves, whether that's tracking our calories, tracking our runs. And something I found really helpful when I am feeling like my brain is full is if I'm heading out for a run, the intention is always to come back feeling better than I did when I went out. But knowing that the chimp might be in a bit of control and knowing how easy it might be to start looking at that data and analyzing it, I've chosen to wear my watch, it's picking up the steps, but not to turn it on to a run. So I really can just go by how I feel, know that if I need to walk, I can walk. And actually, normally I feel like I'm running exactly the same way. I just got a little less pressure. The data you get from a run like that doesn't tell you whether you felt good on that run. So it's not needed. But when we plan in that calm, like any other commitment, it can stop being an afterthought and it becomes part of your strategy for feeling good. And number 5 is to notice what happens when you do take the pressure off. Something I have seen time and time again, both with myself and with clients, is that when we take the pressure off, our productivity and consistency massively improve. When I stopped forcing myself to do everything at once, I got more done because my energy wasn't spread so thin. And it's the same with health and fitness. When clients ease up on the all or nothing mindset, whether that's taking a break from calorie tracking, choosing shorter workouts, or giving themselves permission to rest, they often do better. Their brains have more space, their choices feel calmer, and because it feels more doable, they actually stay consistent. And I actually had a message which I've got written down, which I think sums this up. I just wanted to send a quick message to say I'm loving this new approach to exercise. Taking the pressure off and not feeling like I have to do long or big sessions means what I am doing, I'm really enjoying, which means I'm doing it more often. I'm back running more frequently. I'm not dreading the gym, so I'm happier to go more often. And I'm fitting in the odd bit at home. My average step count is up too. I mean, that sums it up better than I ever could. Doing more isn't always the answer. Sometimes it's doing enough and consistently that is going to create that biggest change. Then we have number 6, to celebrate what we do manage, because when you celebrate what you've done rather than what's left to do, you're reinforcing the idea that progress doesn't come from you doing things perfectly. Celebrate that you took a pause instead of pushing through. Celebrate that you did 2 workouts instead of 3. Celebrate that you prepped one healthy meal rather than just writing the whole day off because you couldn't do it perfectly. This shift in mindset, going from I didn't do it all to I did what I could and I did what mattered, is where things start to move forward again. When we remove that pressure to be perfect, productivity often rises because you're working with your energy and not against it. So if you take nothing else from this episode, I want you to remember this. Pause isn't the opposite of progress. It's what makes progress possible. So before we finish, I want to give you a quick practice that you can try right now, as long as you're somewhere safely to do it. A 2-minute reset that you can use anytime that you feel that go mode creeping back in. So if you can, plant your feet on the floor, unclench your jaw, and let your shoulders drop. Now I want you to take a double inhale through your nose. We're going to do a small one and then a slightly bigger one. So, and then a long, slow exhale through our mouths. And then we're going to do that twice more. So inhale, top it up, and then a long exhale. And again, small inhale, a bigger inhale, and then a slow release. And as you breathe, your stomach will rise and fall. And this is your diaphragm working, the breath traveling right down into your belly. Notice how the world just feels a little bit quieter already. When your breath slows, your body is hearing the message, I'm safe, I can ease off. And from that calmer place, I want you to take a moment to ask yourself 3 questions. What's actually important right now? What can wait until later? And what's one thing I can do to make today easier for myself? And that's it. You've just given your human the space to take charge again. This tiny pause can completely change how the rest of your day feels. Your goal isn't to control every thought or every habit. It's simply to notice when you're in that go mode and give yourself permission to reset. Thank you so much for being here and listening today. I would absolutely love it if you could review, subscribe, and share this podcast so that others can find it too. And as always, if you have any questions at all, you can find me on Instagram at Ruth MacFit. I'll look forward to speaking to you next time. Goodbye.